Life has a peculiar way of unfolding, doesn't it? Sometimes it's a gentle, predictable current, flowing smoothly towards a known destination. Other times, it's a raging river, tearing through the familiar, carving new paths where none existed before. For some, like Ethan Vance, life had long settled into the quiet, almost solitary hum of a well-worn path. Ethan was a man forged by the solitude of the Montana wilderness. His face, etched with the lines of wind and sun, told tales of countless seasons spent beneath vast, unforgiving skies. A former park ranger, now a reclusive conservationist, he found solace in the ancient whispers of the pine forests and the silent grandeur of the Rocky Mountains. His cabin, a sturdy sentinel of hand-hewn logs, stood nestled deep within the Lolo National Forest, miles from the nearest paved road, a sanctuary from the bustling world he'd long left behind. He preferred the company of elk and eagles to the sometimes hollow echo of human voices. But fate, as it often does, has a mischievous streak. It enjoys stirring the pot, especially when someone thinks they've mastered the recipe of their own existence. It was a late autumn evening, the kind where the air bites with the promise of winter, and the first dusting of snow clung to the highest peaks. Ethan was tending his crackling wood stove, the aroma of pine smoke and simmering venison stew filling the cozy space. Suddenly, the very ground beneath him trembled. Not a gentle tremor, but a deep, guttural shudder that rattled the jars on his shelves and sent his old hound dog, Copper, whimpering under the table. He'd felt quakes before, but this was different. This was impact. A sound followed, a low, sustained hum that vibrated in the air, gradually fading into an eerie silence. Grabbing his trusty old hunting rifle, a reflex born of years in the wild, and his powerful headlamp, Ethan ventured out into the biting cold. The sky was a canvas of bruised purples and grays, the full moon struggling to pierce the cloud cover. He followed an invisible pull, a gut instinct, deep into the dense, whispering woods. The air grew colder, charged with a strange, almost electric energy. The hum, though faint, returned, guiding him. Then, through a clearing, he saw it. A sight that defied every ounce of his rugged, practical understanding of the world. Embedded deep within a newly formed crater, its metal shell scorched and torn like paper, lay something alien. It wasn't a plane crash. It wasn't a meteor. This was something from beyond. Its surface, a dull, unfamiliar alloy, shimmered faintly, a testament to an impossible journey. Around it, the trees stood silent, their branches draped in a fresh layer of frost, as if mourning the intrusion. Ethan approached cautiously, rifle ready, heart thudding a primal rhythm against his ribs. The air around the wreckage was frigid, yet he felt a peculiar warmth emanating from a jagged tear in the ship's hull. And then he heard it. A sound soft and trembling like a lost lamb. A whimper. He lowered his rifle, curiosity overriding caution. Peering into the glowing fissure, past twisted wires that pulsed with an unearthly light, he saw her. She was small, no bigger than a human toddler, curled amidst the wreckage. Her skin, a faint, iridescent silver, glowed softly in the gloom, barely visible beneath a layer of soot and debris. Her eyes, impossibly large and luminous, were pools of liquid mercury, reflecting the broken stars above. She wore no clothes, only tattered remnants of what looked like some kind of fabric clinging to her delicate frame. Small burns marred her chest, silent testaments to the crash. Ethan hesitated. Was this real? A hallucination brought on by the strange energies? He extended a hand, slowly, carefully. The creature didn't flinch. Her enormous eyes met his, filled with a raw, innocent terror. As his palm neared, she shivered, then let out a soft, guttural sound, not unlike a human coo, when she felt the warmth. Ethan, whispering, voice filled with a surprising tenderness, "Hey there, little one. It's okay. I've got you." He lifted her, careful to avoid the sharp edges of the wreckage. She was incredibly light, like a bundle of feathers, yet each tremor that ran through her small body weighed heavily on his heart. The snow had begun to fall, soft, ethereal flakes clinging to his eyelashes, but Ethan barely noticed. He took off his thick woolen jacket, wrapping the tiny alien in its warmth. Holding her close, he walked back through the silent forest to his old pickup truck, its engine coughing to life in the cold. During the bumpy ride back to his cabin, she occasionally opened her luminous eyes, studying his face with an intensity that made him feel utterly exposed, yet strangely seen. Each jolt of the truck elicited a tiny whimper, and Ethan found himself murmuring broken promises, urging her to hold on just a little longer. They reached his cabin just before dawn. The first thing he did was stoke the wood stove, bringing a comforting warmth to the rustic space. He heated water, rummaged for clean cloths and makeshift bandages, and prepared a small bed by the roaring fire. He knew nothing of alien physiology or medicine, but he couldn't let her die alone in the darkness. As he gently cleaned the soot from her face, the little girl opened her mouth and let out a short, guttural sound, unlike anything he'd ever heard. It was a sound of relief, of pain, of something ancient and far away. Ethan smiled, a strange mixture of fear and fierce hope swelling in his chest. He swore a quiet oath. "Ethan," whispering, "I'll call you Lyra, and you'll never be alone again." Outside, the blizzard raged, but inside, the warmth of the fire and the soft, steady rhythm of Lyra's breathing gave him a reason to breathe too. Lyra dozed, nestled against his arm, and Ethan knew, without understanding why, that his life had just changed forever. Years unfolded, unbidden and unasked. Ethan Vance, the solitary ranger, had never envisioned fatherhood. Yet, each day spent with Lyra deepened his conviction. Solitude was the bleakest of deaths. The alien child became a radiant spark, illuminating every shadowed corner of his cabin, every hardened crevice of his heart. She learned to speak, blending human words with the lyrical murmurs of her native tongue, a cadenced melody that Ethan cherished as a secret whispered solely for him. In the mornings, before the sun painted the eastern peaks, little Lyra would sneak into his bed, curling against his chest. She'd babble incomplete phrases while he, half asleep, embraced her, feeling her small warmth melt the frost from his old wounds. Ethan worked tirelessly, collecting salvageable metal, timber, repairing engines for distant ranches, anything to return before dusk, to find Lyra waiting by the door. She'd launch herself into his arms, bury her face in his neck, and whisper a single word that made him forget the bite of the mountain air. "Lyra, Papa." The nights, however, harbored their own shadows. Lyra would sometimes awaken drenched in sweat, her silver eyes gleaming like polished mirrors in the faint light of the fireplace. She would cry out impossible names, names that twisted on an alien tongue. Her small hands would flail as if warding off unseen specters. Ethan would rush to her, holding her close, rocking her back and forth, whispering promises he himself didn't know how to keep. Outside, the wind would lash against the cabin's weathered timber, but inside, only Lyra's uneven breathing, gradually calming, could be heard. Once she finally slept again, Ethan would watch her for long moments. Sometimes, he imagined he could discern faint echoes of another face in hers, a face that might one day return to claim her. That thought would make him clench his jaw, swallow his fear, and reinforce the heavy bolts on his door. By dawn, Lyra always awoke with a crystalline laugh, as if the nightmares had never been. She'd race barefoot across the floor, chasing dust motes dancing in the first light. Her tiny fingers would trace the wrinkles on Ethan's face as he let himself be caressed, feeling both old and young at once. There were days she would sit by the window, her liquid pupils fixed on the sky, whispering words Ethan didn't understand. In those moments, he would hold his breath, afraid to ask what she saw beyond the clouds. But when she returned to seek his embrace, he knew that even if the past came knocking, Lyra would remain his, if only for one more precious breath. Whispers began to circulate in the distant town. Stories of the strange child who never seemed to fall ill or cry like the others. Some said she brought ill fortune, a curse from the mountains. Ethan met these rumors with silence and a steely gaze. To him, Lyra was neither a threat nor a celestial mistake. She was the sole reason he rose each morning and lay down each night without feeling the crushing weight of solitude in his bones. And so, amidst invented words, shared laughter, and nightmares conjured with tenderness, Lyra grew in the only world she knew, a small home, with windows that fogged every winter, but always filled with an impossible, unquenchable warmth. The day Serafina arrived, the entire earth seemed to hold its breath. From early morning, a strange wind swept through the forest surrounding the cabin, carrying an electrical murmur that pricked the skin. Lyra had awakened before dawn, sitting by the window motionless, gazing towards the trees as if listening to an ancient song only she could comprehend. Ethan watched her as he brewed coffee, a prickle of unease tracing its way down his spine. There was no warning, no engine noise, no footsteps, just a soft, deliberate rap on the worn wooden door. Ethan's coffee cup clattered on the table. Lyra slowly turned her head. Her silver eyes reflected an unknown brilliance, a blend of fear and something far deeper, like a reunion that pierced her with forgotten memories. Ethan opened the door. Standing there was a tall figure, shrouded in a cloak of dark, shimmering fabric that seemed impervious to the heavy drizzle falling in thick threads. The wind played with the edges of the cloak, hinting at translucent skin, tattoos that glowed like living constellations, and eyes that mirrored Lyra's, only older, infinitely sadder, and fiercely intelligent. Serafina raised her face, revealing a beauty that almost hurt to behold. Her lips parted, and she uttered Lyra's name as if it had been trapped in her throat for centuries. Ethan tried to speak, but his voice died when Lyra rushed from behind him, pressing her small body against the visitor's leg. Serafina let out a broken gasp, falling to her knees to embrace the child. Between guttural whispers, she kissed Lyra's forehead, her cheeks, her tiny hands. Lyra laughed, cried, babbled phrases half human, half alien. Ethan felt everything dissolve around him. The fireplace, the walls, the scent of damp wood, all became a distant echo as Serafina lifted her gaze to his. There was no hatred in her eyes, but no gratitude either. There was possession, a silent claim to something that had always belonged to her. Serafina, she is my life. You have cared for the only thing I had left. Now I will live here with her, with you. She neither asked permission nor offered explanations. She rose, holding Lyra in her arms as if the child weighed nothing, and walked towards the fire, leaving a trail of raindrops that seemed to evaporate upon touching the floor. Ethan remained in the doorway, feeling the dampness seep into his bones. He had protected Lyra from storms, hunger, malicious glances. He had built invisible walls to hide her from the world, but he had never imagined that his greatest fear would come seeking her with a smile and a silent promise never to leave. As he closed the door behind him, he heard Lyra's laughter mingle with a soft melody emanating from Serafina's throat, like a lullaby that spoke of distant stars and broken vows. His heart, calloused by solitude and hope, pulsed with the certainty that nothing would ever be the same. And though he didn't yet understand the price, he knew he was willing to pay it, whatever it might be. The first nights with Serafina under his roof were a kaleidoscope of wakefulness and feverish dreams for Ethan. During the day, the cabin seemed blessed by a fragile calm. Lyra would flit between them, showing her mother every improvised toy, every corner she had transformed into her childhood kingdom. Serafina would laugh softly, as if each chuckle unearthed a fragment of her ancient voice. Ethan would watch her in silence, seated by the stove, his hands calloused from wood splinters, his nails black with earth and grease. He watched her caress Lyra's hair, comb it with fingers that moved like brushes over living silk. He listened to her murmur stories he didn't comprehend, tales of twin moons and floating cities, promises of a homeland Lyra was heir to without knowing it. But when the child finally succumbed to exhaustion from so much play and laughter, something would shift. Serafina would remain still by the improvised bed, her gaze fixed on Ethan from the dimness. In her eyes, a different fire would ignite. It wasn't tenderness or gratitude, it was a silent assessment, a secret judgment that he felt like knives piercing the back of his eyes. One pre-dawn hour, after ensuring Lyra was deeply asleep, Serafina sat across from him, so close that Ethan could feel the exotic scent of her skin, something between rare wood smoke and flowers he'd never encountered. "Serafina, you haven't asked questions." Her words hung in the air like a baited hook. Ethan averted his gaze, focusing on a log sputtering in the stove. His voice came out hoarse, almost a growl. "Ethan, I don't need to know where you come from. She's safe with me. That's all that matters." Serafina let out a brief, ancient laugh. She leaned towards him, so close her shadow consumed the firelight. "Serafina, you cared for her better than I could. But I don't want you to keep thinking you have the right to keep only half of what is mine." Ethan felt his throat constrict, his fingers clenching on his knee. "Ethan, what does that mean?" Serafina tilted her head, as if studying the exact contours of his fears. Her eyes softened almost imperceptibly as she murmured, "Serafina, it means if she is to live among humans, I will live here with you, by your side. I will not leave again, and I will not allow anyone else to try and snatch her from us." He wanted to argue, to demand explanations, but then she slid a hand over his chest. The warmth of her palm penetrated the worn fabric of his shirt, reaching directly into a heart that couldn't remember beating so fast. "Serafina, don't fear, Ethan." Her voice turned to thick honey, an irresistible enchantment. "Serafina, you're part of this now, whether you like it or not."
Like and subscribe.